Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Centre for Suicide Prevention and Alberta Centre for Injury Control and Research's webinar, The 5 Things We Wish All Teachers Knew About Substance Use and Suicide. We've had a great deal of interest in this subject, and I'm so glad that we have so many people attending. We are recording this webinar, and it will be made available to everyone on the Centre for Suicide Prevention's website in the next couple of days. As well, on the website, there are the previously recorded topics that we've discussed in this webinar series. And at the end of today's presentation, we'll share the information about the topics for the upcoming webinars. Participants are in listen-only mode, so please use the chat box at the bottom right-hand portion of your screen for providing any comments or questions. We will open up for a Q&A at the end of Linda's presentation. And so our presenter today is Linda Skur with the Centre for Suicide Prevention. She is a counseling program supervisor with Alberta Health Services, Adult Addiction Services and Mental Health. Because we wanted to keep the introductions quite brief, there is some additional information on one of the slides in the presentation about Linda and her colleagues who helped develop the content for this presentation. So, with no further ado, I am going to mute myself, Linda, and open your mic.
Okay. Thank you, Patty. Good afternoon and welcome to our 4th session in this series, Substance Use and Suicide in Youth. And I think we'll start with the good news. And the good news is that most young people do not experience a serious problem related to their use of alcohol and other drugs. Some will, most don't. The other piece of good news is that those who do have very serious problems get caught real quick. And I think that that's good news, because getting caught in the environments that young people are in, that is the home, the school, and the community, means that they get help sooner. And so that's the biggest part of me. It's not that I'm in a punitive kind of mode around that. It's just that they are likely in environments where their use doesn't go unnoticed for quite some time. So if most young people don't have a serious problem related to their use, why would we be concerned? And some of the factors that come to mind would be that because they are young and also invincible, as we all were at that time, they are more likely to engage in risky behavior, and perhaps the lack of impulse control that is sometimes a prominent feature for young people plays a part. And because of this, young people are more likely to experience greater harms related to their use, which certainly can lead to problems that develop early on when they're young, but long-standing problems when in adulthood. The kinds of substances that young people use hasn't changed a whole bunch over the years. The most commonly used substances include alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, and ecstasy. Matter of fact, young people smoke more cannabis than tobacco right now at this time. And in terms of surveys that have been done across Canada, trying to get a sense of how prevalent is this use, one of the things that I think we can say we are doing something right in Alberta, I have referenced the surveys that have this information, where this information was taken from at the end of the seminar. But one of the things that the surveys indicate is that in all cases, the percentages of use are lower in Alberta than any other provinces in Canada. So one of the things that comes to the front is that on average, young people begin experimenting with alcohol at approximately 13 to 14 years of age. In grade 7, for example, 8 to 28% of young people have tried alcohol, and we know that use increases markedly with age. And so, for example, by grade 12, 77 to 93% have tried alcohol in that time. Smoking, as I said, is something that more young people are smoking cannabis than tobacco, despite the advances we have made with tobacco. In terms of cannabis, again, we've discussed its prevalence within the school system. The majority of students in grades 7, 9, and 10 report never having used cannabis, and 29% of 15 to 17 years old report using cannabis in 2010, while 50% of 18 to 19 year olds report using cannabis in the same year. Some surveys report that 3 to 5% of the population uses cannabis daily, and again, it's more common than smoking tobacco. We have made advances with tobacco across North America, both with an adult and a young and a youth population. And although certainly there's evidence that these rates are falling, there still are a concern, primarily again for adolescent females who use nicotine as a means to control their weight. And we also know that while most young people do not get into patterns of problematic use, that there are some youth that are at higher risk. And the youth in what we would describe as high risk groups include runaway and street involved youth, youth in custody, youth with concurrent disorders, sexually abused and exploited youth, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and questioning teens, and First Nations, Inuit, and Métis youths. We know that it's not a surprise that perhaps again the involvement around alcohol and drug use is higher. These are the most vulnerable groups and marginalized groups, and certainly again their involvement in substance use or the risk of suicide is certainly not a surprise. They experience more than their fair share of challenges and problems in other life areas as well. And it certainly has been suggested that the use of substances for many of the high-risk groups are in fact an effort and an attempt to manage trauma that they have experienced in a number of different settings. Experts would also suggest that it's never just one risk factor that increases substance use or whether or not people get involved with that, but it is a cumulative risk factor, and that includes factors like the individual, the family, the peer group, school, and the environment. One of the things that we know about the individual is that age is the strongest determinant of risk. We know that substance use increases with age during adolescence, peaks about mid to late 20s, and then subsides with typical life changes that include things like employment and marriage and other parts of transition or development. The gender gap is narrowing, although males tend to use more substances and use more heavily than females. It includes what kinds of attitudes or values and beliefs that people hold around substance use. And certainly, again, for young people, impulsivity, thrill seeking, psychological disorders such as conduct disorder, concurrent disorders play a huge role in terms of looking at increasing their risk around use. Within the family, the factors include poor parenting practices, such as inadequate monitoring, a low degree perhaps of bonding between parent and child, abuse, family conflict, family modeling of substance using behaviors, and perhaps lax parental attitudes towards substance use. Within the peer group, the peer substance use is among the strongest predictor of substance abuse by youth. And it's not necessarily the peer pressure that I think that we have typically thought it would be. It's that young people choose which group they would like to belong to. And so it's not that they're being pressured to belong, but they are attracted towards, as we all are, being with people who hold similar kinds of attitudes and values that we do. So again, it's a choice that people make to hang out with friends who might use and hold similar attitudes around that. Within the school settings, certainly academic failure beginning early on in late elementary a lack of commitment to school, and low bonding perhaps with other students and teachers, a drinking culture, or what are the norms for the school, approval or disapproval, may also impact and influence whether or not people use. Within the cultural and social environment, certainly the increased availability of a substance, including ample supply, low price, increases the likelihood of its use. Media portrayals and social norms favorable to substance use are also influential. I think you'd probably agree with me that most of the ads that we see on TV uh, show people having a really good time when drinking and using rather than some of the other tragic consequences of that. And the other thing about making it attractive and likely, I'm just reminded I got a piece of information today that there is a group called the Super Smoker Club that has just introduced on uh, e e-cigarettes where you get the not the real cigarette, but you can smoke with the e-cigarette, but now it comes with Bluetooth, and it has capabilities that a smoker can make phone calls and listen to music while puffing. When you look at the kind of advertising around that and the suction, the attraction is certainly a big part of what we're dealing with here. Um, Substance use and abuse are different. Substance use, we would believe, is more directly associated with the social and environmental factors that we've just touched upon briefly, such as peer use and drug availability and accessibility. Substance abuse probably maybe has its roots more in things like early use, some of the genetic factors within the individual, different temperaments and psychological determinants such as childhood abuse, trauma, and psychological disorder. Why do some people, young people, experiment with alcohol and other drugs? Some of the reasons include it's quick, it's easy, it's fun. Young people are curious. There is an opportunity to rebel, probably against authority figures. And for many, it's the rite of passage into adulthood, is that a declaration of I belong and I'm getting ready to join the next group here. Why do some people go beyond? Uh, People find that certainly using may help with managing stress or pain or numbness. It becomes a part of personal identity. It's who I am. And again, it certainly might involve at some level peer acceptance. This is where I belong, and I'm joining the club. One of the ways to look at whether or not substance use is a problem is we look at what we would call a continuum of use. And as I said, this is one way of trying to understand whether or not a person is experiencing problems and perhaps which stage they might be in. You will see that it's presented in a linear fashion with arrows at one end, no use, and arrows at the other end, dependence and addiction. And the first thing that I would like to share about this continuum of use is that I have never met anybody, and you haven't either, or we never will, who starts off on this particular journey with the idea that gee, I don't drink at all. We'll use alcohol as the example. So I won't use any alcohol, but I think I'll start drinking. And I really hope I can continue on until I can experience real serious problems like dependence or addiction. I don't mean to be facetious around that, but one of the things that this should tell us or reminds us clearly is that this is a highly insidious process. And it's not something that I know that we are often tempted to say to folks that we know are experiencing problems. Gee, if you just tried harder, if you really cared, you could stop. It's just a matter of willpower and finding out that those things don't seem to work the way that we would like them to. And part of it is maybe not appreciating what we need to understand about the relationship that people have with their drug of choice, because they do have a relationship, and that's something I'd like to superimpose over this continuum of use. It will be our task to understand again the relationship and the value and meaning of that, because if we don't understand that, then it's hard to help people find alternatives when we ask them to stop or to quit doing that in terms of helping them find replacements instead of the drinking or the drug use. So let's start at one end, and as I said, we'll use alcohol as the example. And so the first question I would ask would be to say, do you know people who don't drink? And of course, you say, well, of course we do. And then I would say, what's wrong with them? No, no. What we know is that there are many good reasons why many people choose not to drink, and that will include cultural considerations. It will include religious considerations. It will include things like uh, I don't like the loss of control. It will include things like financially I can't afford it. There's all kinds of really good reasons why some people choose not to drink. In Canada, 83 to 85% of the Canadian population drinks. Alcohol is a legal drug, and most people who drink will be classified or defined as what you and I will describe as social drinkers. Social drinkers, recreational drinkers, or responsible drinkers. As a matter of fact, 90% of the population who drink are classified as social drinkers. Only about 10% go on to develop what you and I will describe as a dependency or addicted to alcohol. So let's take a look at what those things would look like. With the social use, and again, I'd invite you to consider the relationship that people have because it's a real relationship, and we look at the bond that people have with their drug of choice. So when we talk about social use, we're talking about the kind of use that is usually done with others, so it has a social context. I don't necessarily mean to ever say either that drinking alone is a problem because it's not. Lots of people thinking if you drink alone, you must be an alcoholic. That has nothing to really do with it. We'd have to find out a lot more information around that. But the social context, social use is usually in in context with uh, special occasions, weddings, graduations, celebrations of some kind. And the person's use does not really cause any problems in their major life areas. Uh, Hangovers might be there, but they're part of this process and are no doubt forgivable within that. The bigger issue is that people are able to stop when they want to. They can walk away, so the bond with the drug is not strong. In terms of misuse of alcohol, for example, we might see that indicated by people beginning to use or to drink as a way of managing stress or pain. And one of the things that we know is that it works. And that's why people continue to use it. It's predictable, it's reliable in terms of doing what it needs to do. One of the things that happens is that we see people begin to have an increased reliance on the substance in order to manage this. In terms of abuse and dependence and addiction, one of the things that we find is that people experience negative consequences in any one of their major life areas. The life areas include uh, family, other kinds of intimate relationships, peer relationships, school, work, legal, financial, physical health, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being. And we would say that when a person experiences problems as a result of their use in any one of the major life areas, then it's a problem. The other indicator is that people no longer have control over their use. We don't know, we can't pinpoint exactly when the driver of the bus changes, when people lose control. We just know that it happens. And so when a person continues to use despite this, then we would say that it certainly is in the abuse arena. The other factors that we would look at would be probably when people are abusing alcohol, they are physically addicted. There's a physiological addiction to the drug, and that's evidenced by two features: by tolerance, that the person needs more to try and recapture the feeling, which they will never recapture, and that when they don't have the drug, they go into withdrawal. And so their body tells them that I need to have this in my body so that I can stop shaking, for example. The other evidence the physiological uh, dependence upon the drug is that, again, the person has a loss of control. They may still have control over when they drink, but when they start drinking, they can't stop. Addiction or dependency is a continuation of abuse. Addiction and dependency are interchangeable terms. I'm not a fan of labels, so again, I tend to use the word dependency, but they are interchangeable in that particular way. And we see all of the things that happen in the abuse stage, but the other thing that we certainly see is the person's life begins to revolve around their use. Correlation between substance abuse and suicide is certainly, there's a significant correlation, and I would emphasize there's a correlation, but it's not a causal relationship. In terms of psychological or mood disorders, alcohol and drug abuse is the second most uh, significant contributor after depression to suicidal behavior. And studies again have shown that up to half of all people who die by suicide are intoxicated at the time of their death. And as we know around things like alcohol and other kinds of drug use, certainly, although alcohol is a depressant, the initial effects are euphoric. People become uninhibited. And in terms of impulse control, that can impact that very significantly, particularly for a younger person who perhaps impulse control is something that is still underdeveloped at this time. So it can certainly impair their judgment. It can increase impulsivity and certainly lead to depression over time. It disrupts social relationships and alienates many social connections that people need at this particular time. Am I done? Okay. Can I go on? Okay. So I guess I try to bring it down to where it seems to fit for you is that harmful involvement in alcohol and other drugs, I would consider as an invitation to ask about suicide. I'm not talking about trying to ask about suicide after every party on the weekend because that's not a good fit either. I think that you need to trust your intuition here and recognize when somebody is really actively troubled by the use perhaps of alcohol and drugs. And it's not just at weekends or at parties. It's something that is a very pervasive part of their life. And as I said, if we tend to notice that, then I would take that as an invitation to ask about suicide. There's many different ways that we can do this. One of the ways that we might be able to say this would be something like this. I know that there are many different reasons why some people use alcohol and other drugs. Some people, and I should substitute young people, but young people are people too. So some young people use them to help deal with pain or stress or anger, hurt, whichever words you choose to use, and difficult circumstances. Sometimes people who use are also so desperate that they think about suicide. I wonder if that's a thought that you've had. That might be an example how we might be able to take advantage of what we would describe as an invitation. In terms of your particular role, I don't think that we can overemphasize that you play a pivotal role within this. You are probably maybe one of the folks who has more contact with this younger person that perhaps a lot of other people do. And for that reason, your observation, your relationship, and how that is with the individual will be huge in terms of trying to look at and understand what's different about this particular individual, or perhaps again your role in connecting some of the dots that you see. And as I said, I can't overemphasize that you play a very significant role within all of this. If a young person does share with us that they are thinking about suicide, our first thought is always safety first. Um, every school, every district has policies, protocol, procedures that help us guide, or that guide us in terms of managing care and next steps for the student, for the family, for you. And as always, we would say, as you would, always err on the side of caution. I worry about, I know that we talk about safety plan agreements where we get the person to agree and make some commitments. I worry often for younger people, again, with their drinking and their drug use, about sometimes that goes out the window. Uh, Not that they don't mean to, but it's not something that they can necessarily keep if they continue to use. So it might mean that you and I might have to look at places to keep them safe, and certainly a great deal of family involvement will be required around that. But it could be detox, it could be hospital, it could be safe places, physical places to look after young people. You don't, I know what it must feel like, but you don't necessarily need to do this on your own, and you have plenty of other organizations and agencies that can help us out and back us up with this. And so part of this includes where can you get more information on this? The Center for Suicide Prevention right here, Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta Health Services. We've included the numbers, and I would call them to get more information and to provide you with information and support around managing this particular aspect. I think we are done. There's the references on the back if you care to look them up.
Thank you, Linda. So, Linda, I will just ask a question, and then we'll ask people if they have questions to put their questions in the chat box. And so my question has to do with, are there gender differences between the roles that substance use plays with boys and girls and the suicidality risk?
I certainly, again, that's supported in the literature and our experiences that males tend to drink and use more heavily than females. That's consistent with a young adult population and an adult population as well. That is also consistent with the risk of suicide. We certainly know that males carry a higher risk, not because they are male, but because of the methods, again, that they would choose to use. So you're absolutely right on both counts.
Thanks, Linda. And I see there's a question asking about the percentage of people who are impaired when completing the act of suicide.
The best information that we have on that one is that 50% of the people were thought to be impaired at the time of their death.
And is that specifically youth or just people in general?
People in general at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Linda? Give me people a minute to type. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so Linda, thank you to you and your colleagues for this great presentation this afternoon. If people have further questions after today, they can certainly contact the Center for Suicide Prevention. Just a reminder that we will be identifying the web location of the link at the Center for Suicide Prevention's website, which is www.suicideinfo.ca. As well, the links for all of the previously recorded webinars are also at this location. We do have identified the next 3 webinars in terms of the topics. In March, we will be talking about how to talk to parents about suicide. April, we'll be looking at GLBT youth. And in May, anxiety disorders and depression. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending the webinar today. I would just encourage you, we will be forwarding out a survey. We are required to identify some information in that survey in order to meet the requirements of the funding that we have for providing this service. So please, please do take a few minutes when you receive the survey link to go to the survey and fill it out. Thank you and good evening.